Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm talking with Susan Dugan today. And Susan just recently got back from Temecula, California, where she attended an academy class put on by the Foundation for A Course in Miracles there. And we thought it'd be interesting and informative to have Susan share what she gleaned from the always wonderful and insightful work that goes on there, as well as perhaps tied into a little bit of lesson 132 in the Course in Miracles workbook. So, welcome, Susan.
Hi, Bruce. It's nice to be here.
So, do you want to just start in with some of your
Okay.
experiences from Temecula?
Okay, sure. I mean, it was a 5-day academy class, and so there were a lot of readings and a lot of material, and so I'll only be able to scratch the surface of it, I'm sure. But the name of the workshop was "The World: A Maladaptive Solution to a Non-Existent Problem," which is a phrase that Ken coined to describe to describe pretty much the whole situation here. And in fact, I was listening to a short YouTube from a video that he did. I guess it was posted in 2012, I think February 2012. I may have even been there. I have no recollection of it, but I might have even attended that workshop because I was there in February, I thought, of 2012. But anyway, and what he was saying in the YouTube that I just watched this morning was that if there was one thing that he wanted to be remembered for, it was that phrase, for coining that phrase, and he was being very playful about it, and he said, so those of you who survived me, I want you to remember that. And so the entire workshop or academy class, and it was taught by Jeff Siebert and Rosemary Lasasso, who are just amazing teachers. Every time I experience that their teaching, it's better and better each time. They're such a wonderful combination of so many years, decades of immersing themselves and absorbing Ken's wisdom, working very closely with him, being his trained teachers. They were teaching back then on a much more limited basis than they are now, but and then working so closely with them in their various roles at the foundation, and then the combination of that with their being able to apply this, as we all are as students of the course, in their own classrooms of their own lives. And so they really have an inside out perspective on what it's like to try to live this, and a lot of humility about it, even after all the years that they've been doing this, and it's very encouraging, I think, for all of us, because they are constantly emphasizing, rather than, as so many of us, I think, and one of the big mistakes we can make is to underestimate our resistance to this and to the ego, and to try to skip over our resistance, or to tamp it down, or to make the course, kind of rewrite the course to fit, to bring it into the world. And what they were really emphasizing in this was that it's so important for us to, that a very necessary part of this journey, and a place that we may be stuck in for a long time, is coming to the place of realizing that I'm choosing this. What I'm experiencing, when I'm experiencing myself as a victim, this is an outward picture of the inward condition of believing, of the belief, and it didn't really happen, but that I separated from God, I abandoned God, and then turned the story around to believe that God had abandoned me, and from the guilt of this entire belief, projected this world outside the mind, and then followed the projection, and inhabited a body, and now believe I'm at war, basically, with everyone and everything. I think that everything's coming at me, that everything's abandoning me and punishing me. And so when we finally come to the place where we realize that, as the Course is telling us, that this is again, this is a projection of the decision-making mind, not of me, Susan and Bruce personally, but outside this world and dream of time and space. I'm choosing on that level to experience this. because my agenda is to experience myself unfairly treated, so that I can get myself, I can punish myself before God gets me, and so I have a rough life. So I have all of these, I people my dream with all of these characters who don't meet my needs, or abuse me, or abandon me, or betray me, all of the things that we believe others do to us.
What incredible casting, huh?
Yeah, so it is, and but really the realization that I'm choosing this, which the Course is telling us that we are, and that we have another choice, and then the realization that we come up against that, the collision of coming up against the realization that I'm choosing this, and I don't want to stop choosing it. The alternative is too frightening to me, because there's no me in heaven. And what is that going to mean for me if I actually awaken from this dream? And so we are so frightened of this at a subconscious level that we're gonna hit our head against a wall on this, and it may be for a very long time that we may be able to choose it from moment to moment, but that's why we go back and forth, and that's why we find ourselves it isn't, the process isn't painful in and of itself, but it usually is experienced that way because we think that this is all real, and we think that our salvation, we have it so skewed that we now believe that our salvation rests in the fortress of the body that we have each made, and the personal identity that we've made to try to cover up all of this, and if we're not in the ego's thought system, it's one or the other. And so if if they're not the guilty one, then I'm the guilty one, and we can't. That's just such a crushing, because it reminds us of that original guilt. That's such a crushing realization that we come to. And but they were very reassuring that that's part of the journey, that is a necessary step. And even though we may be there for a long time, that we really should, we actually have made a tremendous amount of progress if we can recognize that and just ride it out and just accept it, and then really to the extent possible try to bring Jesus, the awareness of Jesus, the part of our mind, or Holy Spirit, the part of our mind that knows that no one's guilty, into our awareness. I mean, even when we're not, even when we don't believe it, even when we're not sure and we're scared, we must consciously bring that presence in, evoke that presence somehow in whatever way is meaningful to us, so that we know that there's something beyond this. Because if we didn't have faith that there was something beyond this, it truly would be the dark night and end of the soul, but it's not. It's really the darkness before the light. So I'm kind of, that was one aspect of something that they really emphasized about this, that they are particularly good at describing, I think. And it's so comforting. It was so comforting to me, because it's, you recognize, here you have people who really, in a very inspiring way, have dedicated their lives to this, and they know what you're going through. They've gone through it themselves, and they still go through issues with their resistance. And so, they can very compassionately speak to that, and speak from the experience of a relationship, an inner relationship with Jesus, Holy Spirit, that does get us through. So I don't know where else we want to go next with that, but yeah.
Well, that you covered a whole lot of ground there, as you often do. and one of the things that struck me as you're talking about having that relationship with Jesus, Holy Spirit, kindness teacher, whatever label we want to use for that part we took with us into the dream. Sometimes I imagine, and I'm finding it more helpful to about the time that I'm just about ready to revert to an old ego pattern of knee-jerk unkindness reaction, I just kind of imagine sort of like a gentle little poke in the ribs. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this hasn't worked for you before. Do you still want to try this approach,
Right.
kind of thing? And I find that can be helpful, is when including being critical or judgmental or condemning of myself. It doesn't matter if it's me or another person. It's the same principle, and I find that really just to be able to just watch without condemnation the ego strategy in action, and then not necessarily try to change it, but just not judge it, not.
Right. And that really is inviting the Holy Spirit or Jesus in. That's the non-judgmental part of our mind, is the right mind. So, so one other thing that around the practice of it that they really emphasized was, just telling yourself as you're starting to become reactive, or maybe you've already maybe you skipped the starting part and you just it just seemed like it was just this ambush of your ego that sometimes we experience. But if nothing else, if we can remind ourselves that this is a decision, that I have a choice here, and I could choose again. It's those two steps. It's really the three-step process, but in recent years can use lesson 5 and lesson 34 to describe. Lesson 5 is I'm not upset for the reason I think, and lesson 34 is I could see peace instead of this. And then the third step is really taken for us. It's helped me to see this differently, and then we shift. But that second step of I could see peace instead of this is really saying this is a decision. I don't want to see peace maybe right now. Part of me is too afraid right now to experience my innocence, and which also would include my brother's innocence. But I could. So that puts the power back. I'm not a helpless victim of this. Because the way we set it up as a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem is to put, to project it all outside our mind, and then see ourselves and then turn it around that we're the ones being attacked, which takes the decision making out of it. The whole point was to leave the decision making mind and then forget we ever made it up.
Right.
So
yeah,
does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah, I was picturing earlier when you were talking about the first part of your experience there. There have been in recent years some technical advances in making virtual reality headsets where you actually wear like a helmet with virtual reality goggles, kind of thing. And I was thinking that's kind of like what's that?
You have them?
I don't, but I've seen them, online in different places, and I actually tried one at a demo that the local library had last year, and put one on, and it's a very immersive experience, because not only do you have the audio, but you have your complete visual field is immersed in it, and it's very very realistic, and I'm thinking, well, we just have forgotten that we've done that on a cosmic scale. Right. And when we hear that voice that says, there's an innocent alternative where everyone is off the hook, it's sort of like that prompting that says, hey, you could take off this headset, which is really kind of a pretty scary program that we're watching, really, if we look at it honestly, and say,
yeah,
I don't need to immerse myself in this nightmare drama. And that's really the interpretation that it is intended to convey. And all we have to do is really, take it off, or metaphorically switch the channel to our inner kindness teacher's interpretation, which is, this is a dramatization of a tiny idea.
Right, what we think we did, it's like a repetition, of in different form, but it's really almost like it's the PTSD that we have from believing that this really happened, and so we just keep having these, they're different forms, but in content they're just flashbacks of that original belief of what we did to God.
That's a great metaphor. I really like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're all traumatized
Hmm.
by our joint, I mean, there really isn't a joint because it's a one disjoined as one, but our belief that there is this fragmentation is
Hmm.
so crushing and debilitating and traumatizing that we feel compelled to constantly relive it, and because that's in some bizarre psychological way a defense.
Right.
And again, it's a maladaptive solution for this non-existent problem of believing that we separate the guilt that we feel over believing we separated from God, because it doesn't work. We never get rid of the guilt.
Right.
And so, it feels like I mean, most, until the course is giving us a context to look at this in, but before we come to the course, we just robotically believe that it's me or them. It's me or them. I have to get rid of this guilt. And we're not, we think the guilt is coming at us, and we're not aware of the fact that it's coming, again, that it's that we, Bruce and Susan, are actually projections as well
Hmm.
of that belief in guilt.
Hmm.
And so, it never goes away, because as soon as I project, as soon as I'm experiencing as an incoming attack from someone else, all that, then I feel justified in attacking. And so all it does then is nourish the guilt within me, and then I feel guilty. And that, so it's this guilt attack um, cycle, defense attack defense cycle
Hmm.
that just keeps recycling. And so there's just no way out, until we choose, until we recognize that we have a choice, and we have a decision we can make, and we have a different teacher that we can choose. And that teacher is available 24/7 to us, to join with, to see, to truly experience, when our fear subsides, at least, that this is not, that's not the problem. That there isn't, it isn't me or them. It's us, and we're all innocent, despite those, this horrific, what did you call it? The virtual reality, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
of what we seem to be experiencing. So again, it's really that matter of, I have a choice
Right.
here
Right.
about, and we have to begin to look at, before we can come to the idea that we have a choice, we really have to get in touch with how defensive we are, how much we believe that we're attributing, the cause of all of our suffering to anything but its actual cause. And that's a huge step too, and that's part of, the course is telling us there's nothing out there. So this really is an outward picture of the inward condition of again, believing that we threw God under the bus, and then became so fearful of that belief that we had to do this huge cover-up story, and then forget all about it. And so now all we're aware of is the results of what which we seem to be experiencing, but it's all smoke and mirrors, you know.
Great special effects.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, we've convinced ourselves that that's the optimum strategy for getting rid of this unconscious guilt by staying mindless, by forgetting that we have that decision making capability. And as long as we can project it out and be unfairly treated and be the victim of something or someone or some groups of things or someone's, then we think we're off the hook, but we're forgetting that, like a Mobius strip, we're comes back around and joins to
Right.
the mind that made it up, because ideas don't leave their source.
I mean, isn't that true? That truthful of the human condition. I mean, it's like it's you get one damn thing solved, and there's another, and there's
Right.
another, and there's those two lessons. Let me recognize the problem, and then let me recognize my problems have been solved. And it's just, there's only one problem, and it's already been solved. I mean, this never really happened. And but first we have to recognize that the problem isn't in the world, And before we do that, we have to recognize how much we believe the problem is in the world, you know. And the whole course is a training program, a gradual, I mean, it's meant to be a gradual, gentle training program with this teacher, this inner teacher, this new inner teacher that can teach us, you know, one illusion at a time, whatever seems to be upsetting me at any given moment, that's, you know, that is not the cause, that I'm not upset for the reason I think, and I have a choice. I could see peace. Instead of this, if I see it with eyes that can see, which means see it as Jesus sees us, which is you know, we never left our source. Ideas leave not their source. We're still awake in God, just dreaming of exile, you know. So, but we have to see that one fantasy, one reaction at a time until this guilt that we're unaware of is gradually undone, you know, through each of those forgiveness opportunities, and you know, then gradually our fear, you know, the craziness of the ego hangs on till the very end, but we have now a context within which to look at it, and you know, the suffering that we become aware of and now connect with the actual cause can begin to diminish, at least the time we spend in it, you know, as we recognize that we do have a choice, and as we begin to say, you know, my role, the purpose of my life is now different. My new purpose, although I'm still doing, you know, in form probably the same things, but I'm giving them all of those relationships, because everything here is a relationship in a dualistic world. I'm changing the purpose of those relationships from proving duality and rooting me more deeply in this you know, flight from God, this dream of exile, to healing my mind and leading me home. And so now I have a different purpose, and really that purpose again is to experience over time that I'm the dreamer of the dream, that I'm the decision-making mind. I'm not this innocent victim, this helpless outpicturing of, you know, that has been abandoned by God and left to the wolves of these other characters, you know, in my dream.
Dogs of fear, maybe.
The hungry dog. I know we could go on and on with that. Of course, there was a very funny. I'll just tell you a funny. There were a couple of very funny things that happened during the academy, but one of them was that, you know, the chart that Ken has is on a huge whiteboard at Temecula in the main auditorium. I don't know what you call it. You know, the classroom, the large classroom, and so there's a ping pong ball, a blue ping pong ball that represents the decision-making mind in his chart, and
how appropriate, the ping pong, because we go back and forth.
Right,
I hadn't thought of that before, but
so they can move it around, you know, now here and now, and then also the whiteboard flips over, so on the, you know, so on the other side it's blank. On one side it's Ken's chart. The decision maker is in the decision making place in level 2, as you know. It's hard to describe here, but many people listening, if they're Ken people, will understand what I'm saying. And so that ping pong ball, they can also you know, they flip the big whiteboard, and on the other side they can write, you know, and do their own diagrams and whatever, and the teachers use it. And so Jeff was doing another chart that he was explaining the world and all of these things, which was fabulous. And but so he had been using it before in the prior, you know, morning or something, and then Rosemary came in to teach, and the ping pong ball was missing, you know, on the chart. And so there was this big funny thing where, you know, what has happened to the decision maker, and she was kidding around and sort of, you know, turned to one of the staff people that they have around that are helping people, you know, they keep the microphone to give to people who do questions, and so, I mean, you kind of had to be there, but it turned into this very funny thing where everybody, because symbolically, you know, this is true, we think we've lost our mind, we think we've lost the decision-making mind, and we can't find it again, you know. So finally, it was located on the other side of the whiteboard, and we were saved from complete insanity for the afternoon. But really, the power of A Course in Miracles and the great hope of A Course in Miracles is the decision-making mind. It's not even really, I mean, we made up the ego, and the Holy Spirit is just the memory of what we really are. So it's again getting back to the idea that, you know what, this was a belief. We chose it, and we can choose again. That's the great. And I can't fix anything here. I can't seek and find anything here. I can't fill myself up here. This tremendous lack that I feel will never be satiated, because I'm looking in the wrong place. I've got to go back to that blue dot, to that blue ping pong ball, which is present with me wherever I am, because I'm not really here.
Right, right. And that's the Platonic interpretation of that, using, Platonic meaning per Plato's thought system, would be that the perfect blue dot is an idea rather than a specific instance, and it the old form versus content thing. And I have to, when you mentioned that the joke that happened there, it kind of reminded me of one of the things on Ken's audio where he says, oh, yeah, we keep the original locked up in a vault, the blue dot. In one of his audios he said that, and I thought that was funny. But,
right.
but that's actually kind of another metaphor that's really kind of funny, is in addition to how we ping pong back and forth between the two thought systems with a decision-making mind, what we really are is completely safe. It's in God's vault, if you will, and we really don't need to worry about anything. But yet we choose to fret and fuss and invest our identity in this dream of a world, and do it so, like you say, so extensively we don't really recognize the extent of it and how pervasive that we've bought into that thought system.
As you know, like on Ken's chart, it's we're not on level 1. We've forgotten heaven, right. And so so even the decision maker and the Holy Spirit and the ego are really made up. I mean, there's nothing but our oneness joined as one. We've never left our source and level 1, but in the condition we think we're in, the best that we can do before we awaken is to keep choosing the decision-making mind, so that we get back, we undo all of this complexity of a world that we've and all of these enemies that we've created, our belief about them, so that we can discover ourself as the decision-making mind and choose once and for all. Forget, at which point it all, the ping pong ball, everything goes. We're just back in the arms of God, in the heart of God, where we never left. We, meaning, whatever that is, we don't know. I mean, the oneness, the one child of God that is seamlessly fused with its creator, and so there's no place where there's no differentiation. It's that undifferentiated union that we really have never left. So, but it's all a very good symbols to use to talk about this, to help us think about it and practice it, so that we can, so that our split mind will heal, and when it's all healed, when all that guilt over this belief, this false belief is gone, then we're in the real world, and for however long, whatever that means, we are ego free, and we see everything as only a call for love or love. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have no reason to perceive ourselves unfairly treated, and we can only respond with compassion, and then God takes the last step, the Course tells us, which really is, again, just metaphorical, but we awaken.
That phrase you used, seamlessly fused, that sort of rang true for me, and I was thinking, well, that how could our true reality be anything but that perfect oneness? And a few years ago, I started thinking about the word purity, and for something to be pure, it has to be consistent throughout. And I think that's why we're being encouraged to generalize the ideas in A Course in Miracles, and to apply them to everything in our the seeming different aspects and objects and circumstances in our lives. But that purity, to me, is sort of a gateway idea to that, returning to that oneness that we never left. Because if there really is a pure non-dual oneness, then we're being called back from that to ourselves, and it's kind of hard to put into words, but there's a quality of knowingness of that we all have this perfect innocence that we never left. That if we try to make innocence separate from anyone or anything else, meaning there's a bad guy or a bad girl or bad whatever, anything that is less than perfect innocence, perfect oneness, then in our minds we've shattered it, and we're back onto the screen of the dream drama instead of looking at it with the Holy Spirit and the loges.
We're in the hell of specialness, I mean,
yeah.
We're not, that's interesting that that's the definition of purity, but it's also the Course's definition of honesty is consistency.
Right.
And really meaning that, yes, that we're growing into, and we find this very difficult to do, and that's why we're growing up to do it, but to apply this to everyone and everything, including inanimate objects and including non-human creatures, and so we really, we all have our own personal kind of hierarchy of illusions of what we can and cannot forgive, quote unquote. Not that we're ever really forgiving another person or a situation, but that's how we start, and we are really this process itself, excuse me, is helping us to generalize this over time. Again, gradually, as more and more guilt is undone, we're more and more able to apply what the Course is saying in even to the illusions in our own Pandora's box of illusions that seem more catastrophic for us. So we start with smaller things and things, maybe relationships that are not as close to us, not as special, and then we move out to, and we work with our special relationships where we're so invested in having our needs met, in having our way, in being right. That's where all of our specialness, the clash with our own identity is most usually hateful in these relationships. Even the special loved ones, which when they're working fine, and I'm trying to fill myself up from outside, and it's working, then we feel great. But that's also, that also means that when they're not, we can, we're devastated. And so, but anyway, the point of it being that we are being asked to see our sameness, to see everyone here, including, again, inanimate and animate, as really suffering from the same guilt in the mind, and really, worthy ultimately of the same love and forgiveness. And so we as long as we are still having reactions, the ego, we still have an ego, and we still are cherishing and hugging close the Course says the guilt, and that's because we think we're so confused. We think that it's our salvation, and it's really, we're learning through this practice that it's the cause of all of our suffering.
And like Gollum, it's my precious. We think it's something that we can hide and keep invisible, from our own mind, ironically, which of course never works, because all the projections that take the form of these constellations of people,
right?
they keep coming back to us until we forgive them all. And like you say, we may have to start with the grocery clerk or somebody we only see once in a while, or maybe once and never again, and work with those, whatever we think is the easier classroom assignments until we get to the heavies and the big, maybe it's a family member or a partner or boss from hell or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but like you say, it helps, I think, to start with the things that we're comfortable with and give ourselves slack and patience and allow
Yeah. I mean,
that
certainly
to
give
undo.
ourselves slack to I mean, we still want to try to practice
Oh, of
as
course,
much
yeah,
as possible in every situation,
right.
but to recognize that, I mean, the again, that those special relationships are where we really, we really have dug our heels in to, again, prove that I exist, but it's not my fault. And so
Hmm.
they're going to be harder for us to relinquish. The closer anything is to my seeming identity. So anything that's related to me, my spouse, my children, my parents, the things that are the blood ties or the special love ties, and the people that we see on a daily basis. Those are going to be more difficult relationships because again, those are our special love bargains in which we're trying to make ourselves feel okay by either getting from someone else or um, you know by using them to blame for why we don't feel okay.
So
So
in other words, maybe there's no genetic or chromosomal orders of difficulties.
well, I can answer that. From the person's perspective, there's no bodies. And,
Right, right. Or the lesson that we referred to earlier, there is no world, is the central thought the course attempts to teach, in lesson 132.
yeah, yeah, and I think it says it twice, doesn't it? Or
Uh,
pretty much. But that
it might be, yeah.
this is a great lesson to remember when people say, "Well, where does it say that in the course?" Yeah. I mean, it says it in a lot of places, but it says it really clearly here.
Just 4 words, just right out there.
Yeah. And so we can. Do you want to read through some of those paragraphs
Oh,
there?
I think there's plenty there. Maybe I just found myself underlining again paragraphs 3 and 4. Maybe we could read those. Yeah. So how about if I go and read the third paragraph? It seems like they're all good. Those two just jumped out at me. The present now remains the only time. Here in the present is the world set free. For as you let the past be lifted and release the future from your ancient fears, you find escape and give to it the world. You have enslaved the world with all your fears, your doubts and miseries, your pain and tears, and all your sorrows press on it and keep the world a prisoner to your beliefs. Death strikes it everywhere because you hold the bitter thoughts of death within your mind. And death, of course, is nothing more than believing that we could possibly separate from perfect oneness, from God.
Right, right. I mean, and that really speaks to it's very poetically, but all of the suffering that we've caused. Again, it's really projecting this whole idea that we've been abused by God onto the world, and then and all of the characters that we've made up in the world, and the situations we've made up in the world, and all of the victimizers. And so that's where we're constantly pointing, but we're not. But we imprisoned ourselves. It's not what's keeping us in prison.
Exactly.
The decision-making mind. It's our choice to believe it.
Right, right. Well, Ed, when you say imprisoned by God or abandoned by God, I try to remember more often, as often as I can, that lowercase g God is ego's substitute
Right.
for the reality that's beyond anything we can, as individuals fathom, and that waits patiently, using again another metaphor that we can relate to and is comforting, that is totally completely hermetically sealed and no what's the word there's a phrase that completely incompatible with the ego's God, in other words, that
Right.
believes that somehow there's a possibility of loss or separation or birth and death, as this paragraph talks of.
Right. Well, I mean, the God that we all, grew up with, or of the world, is a projection of the ego thought system, is the ego's version of the God, which is just like we are projections, which, has good days and bad days, and has plays favorites, and is abusive, and gets angry, and all of those things. And so yeah, I mean, that's what kind of, I mean, what leads many of us to the Course, I think, in the first place is, or even just the spiritual journey and seeking, is the question of why would a God, what kind of God would that be? And if it's just like me, if it's just as hateful as I am, and so that's all about specialness, and that, again, that was made to reinforce our idea of punishment, that we deserve punishment, and we're going to have a rough life, because we're not going to, I mean, we have to purify ourselves to be, through the lessons that God gives us, to atone for this guilt, right? For the fact that we're unworthy, and that's all an outward picture of this inner condition of believing that we did this to God, and so now we deserve this punishing God.
Isn't it refreshing that our beloved Course redefines so many of those Christian terms like atonement to give us something that's far more inspiring to realize that, for example, atonement in the Course's vernacular has nothing to do with making sin real. It basically is saying, there was no sin, there was no world, it didn't happen. You can let yourself off the hook, but you have to look at it. You have to gently, take Jesus's hand, metaphorically, and look at the incredible devastation that the ego has made. But you get to, as you look at each seeming individual thing one at a time, see that it was just a dream, and that, I think, it helps us further identify with the dreamer rather than the dream figure, and puts us back in the theater audience rather than on the screen.
It's really comforting, and Jesus, the figure of Jesus as our teacher in the Course, is a completely ego-free presence, not the Jesus of the Bible, or the historical Jesus that was recounted in the Bible. So, doesn't make the body real, doesn't make guilt real, loves everyone equally, includes everyone in love, does not recognize sin, does not recognize, would never agree with us that punishment is warranted, and it has infinite patience, knows that we're afraid, doesn't, again, tells us that there's this time is a trick, and that we don't need to stress about this. This can be very gentle. We don't need to. We can take the pressure off ourselves. There's no hurry home. We're not. This is not meant to be struggling with ourselves, pushing ourselves, efforting, muscling through it. It's meant to just again, I have a decision. I could see peace. I'm not right now. I'm not seeing peace. To be really honest with him, and we have him. For wherever we are in the journey, he will play that part with us that we most need. And so, in the beginning, we think of Jesus more as a embodiment, as we all have pictures in our mind of an actual figure, fellow brother, dream figure. And we can relate to Jesus that way, but that we don't want to stay there. We want to grow into the awareness that we have this tremendously loving brother, this friend, this guide, all those synonyms the Course uses, that's just within us, that is constantly available to help us when we're afraid, and we're afraid anytime that we're perceiving ourselves as anything, as guilty, or perceiving anyone else as guilty. That means that we've become extremely fearful over believing that guilt is real, and believing that we deserve punishment. And so he's there for us, Right.
And also, we're in that state whenever we feel unfairly treated, or in the least way victimized, or in other words, sucked into the spokes of the wheel rather than being back in the hub, being in the periphery and the outside. And it's ironic that when we make scapegoats, I like to turn the word around and and use the idea that since you mentioned favorites, a moment ago, I was thinking, well, that's that specialness strategy of taking something that's completely equal, this egalitarian oneness, and making things that belong and don't belong, the we-they paradigm, and we take the people and the things that we like and put them in the lambscape, and the things that we don't like, they're relegated to the goatscape, and they become our scapegoats, and
Right.
so and then the favorites.
Yes.
What's that?
It's very selective.
It is, yeah. But we play it out in, like you say, in our family situations. But when you said favorites, I just momentarily flashed on the old Tommy Smothers skit of "Mom always liked you best,"
Right. Yeah.
All I got was a pet chicken,
Dating ourselves, Bruce.
What's that?
He said we're dating ourselves.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway,
that's right.
yeah. But we have so many, this whole constellation of things that can give us an opportunity to turn it around when we are willing to look at each thing that has either a hangnail or a Hiroshima impact on us in our choice of thinking, and realize that it's easier to start with the little ones, of course, but they're all the same. They're really all just opportunities to forgive the dreamer and say, oh yeah, I don't have to make this projected world an imaginary cause for my lack of peace.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's how we loose the world from all we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Is by is decision by decision. Is
Right.
moment by is really, again, making our lives, the purpose of our lives, a classroom. From the moment we wake up in the morning to wake up in the morning till the moment we seem to go to sleep, and even asking when we go to sleep. For the Course says to put the Holy Spirit in charge of your sleep, and make the purpose of that the healing of your mind. There really is no difference between the waking and the sleeping dreams. It's just that they seem more disjointed when we're sleeping, but there's still the outpicturing of that inner condition. And so, the way that we loose the world from all we thought it was is really throughout our day, moment to moment, whenever we find ourselves tempted from the minor twinge of annoyance to fury, to perceive, to identify an external cause for what I'm feeling, for my lack of peace. That's
Reel it back in. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, that is our opportunity. That's our education. That's our curriculum. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when we get to say, I'm wrong. There's something else going on here that maybe I don't believe it. Maybe this looks very, very convincing. I don't have to believe it, as the workbook tells us with the lessons there that we first are getting introduced to this practice and these concepts. My understanding is not a powerful contribution or any contribution to the truth, really. So, all I need to do is these steps of what Jesus is saying, which is question the cause, raise the cause to question, raise the cause to the light. And just entertain the possibility that I am wrong, and remind myself that this is a decision. I could choose peace. Maybe I'm not ready to. Maybe I'm just having too much fun being angry right now, which ultimately we realize is not a whole lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm not there yet, but I'm wrong. I'm still wrong, and I could see peace. And I will when I'm ready, because this will hurt too much eventually. So,
It seems like that's an important realization when you catch yourself getting mileage, so to speak, out of those seemingly other-inflicted situations, and realizing that the slings and arrows of the outrageous fortune that we think are coming from outside are really just projections of our own thoughts. And then when we, in our more mindful moments, can gently forgive ourselves, and by reeling them back in, and then saying, I really could see peace instead of this, and I I don't have to choose the ego's dirge and ridiculously stupid, silly, inane idea that separation was possible, and then we can release it.
I mean, it's the
Little
awareness
bit by bit. Yeah.
that begins to give us begins to empower us to
Uh-huh.
realize that we're not helpless here.
Right. Right.
If I'm experiencing this, it's because, again, and it's not, I'm not Susan and you're not Bruce making a conscious choice to, it's not my body that's in my brain that's choosing this. Of course, I'm not choosing to be hurt by, this other person physically or psychologically
Mm-hmm.
or emotionally. But on, again, from the level of the decision-making mind, where everything, which we really haven't left, I am choosing it, because I want the content. I want to feel abused, because then I can say I exist, but it's not my fault, and that's our whole agenda. So so again, that kind of takes the judgment out of it. I shouldn't berate myself for doing what bodies are kind of what we've programmed ourselves to do. But if I can raise if I can step back and question what's really going on, that will, over time, sensitize me to become aware that I really do have a choice, and that when I make that choice, I feel better. When I am finally ready to say, okay, Jesus, I would like to see this. I could see peace, and now I would like to see this as you do. And then, when whatever that unconscious resistance subsides, I actually return to peace, in which I just know. I mean, I really don't have whatever conflict was going on there. Almost, it becomes impossible to understand because it's gone. And I do return to an awareness that no one's guilty here. I feel, because I feel innocence, and I have no need to project guilt. Then the other person, I see that they are the same as I am. They're fighting the same hard battle, as Ken always said, and they're just as afraid as I am. It may be taking a different, it may look different in form, what they're doing, but I know the fear. I know that fear that they're coming from. That's what returns to us. That's that perception of our sameness, which is, which brings, for me, that brings compassion. It's like, well, what was this all about then? I mean, of course we're the same, and of course, the response then is love. It was always my call for love. It's only my own mind in need of healing always, and the response is love. That's what I thought I was missing. That other person is exactly is the same as I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're both thinking that we're missing. And it doesn't. I mean, I'm trying to talk about this as though that's like all a conscious, what happens. But that's the only way. You have to use words to try to come back to the experience, and the experience is innocence.
Right.
The experience is I'm okay. Nothing has the power to take my peace away, and we all deserve it. We all deserve peace, and nobody's guilty here.
Mm-hmm. It seems like when we come from what would be called in some circles, a heart-oriented focus, that motivation of kindness that's really comes from a realization of the oneness that we're, like you say, we're all fighting the same battle. Really, then does dissolve in our mind and helps for the other person or persons to see that nobody's anybody's enemy in truth, but we've made up this incredible warfare battleground landscape that appears to be everybody for themselves, and but it's all just a mechanistic, robotic kind of thing. And a few moments ago, something you said reminded me of a video that was on Facebook the other day that I shared, and some Japanese engineers have made a human robot that's very a whole lot farther than it was a few years ago. And the facial expressions as this female robot, was saying things and moving her head around, and it was like it was, and some of the comments, and I had to agree, it was kind of spooky. And yet I think what's spooky is that when we see how our own egos are robotic, it's like turning the spotlight back on the mind. And the ego does not like Gollum to have its ring of invisibility, pulled out and taken from it, because it's like, well, okay, if we can look at our ego shenanigans and see how predictably selfish they are, and see how really just desolately empty all that is, but without condemning it, that gives us the perspective to then back up from it and then choose the Holy Spirit's alternative, which is the real alternative that we've always wanted, and we never left, really. But it just seems like that seeing our own robotic kind of behavior, I think, can be a real help in just looking at that. And as you pointed out earlier, that our own individuality is not a powerful contribution to the truth,
Right.
and that's the robot. I mean, that's what Einstein was saying. You can't solve the problem from the level that you made it up from, and the level we made it up from is the ego's paradigm of duality, and it's not gonna get fixed there. Never
Well,
will.
and it really, I think part of what you're saying is it's an indirect learning, and so.
Right.
So, it's really not, we don't really know how to be kind directly.
Right.
If we were always kind, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind people don't leave heaven.
Right.
But so it's really that becoming sensitive and this process of looking, like the practice itself of whenever, catching my unkindness, catching how much I don't want to be generous, how much I don't, how competitive I feel, how, judgmental and resentful, and all of the negative things that the ways we react to people. It's really, and we do want to look at those without judgment, but often we don't know how to look at them without judgment. So it's really just catching ourselves, and again saying, it's not questioning the cause, questioning why I'm doing this, and asking for help. Recognizing I have a choice, but when we feel that, when we come up against that resistance, that I don't know how to see peace instead of this, and then we usually get. We shouldn't judge ourselves, but we usually do. That's pretty much a knee-jerk reaction to say, especially if we've been working with the Course for a while. How can this be after so much, so many hours of forgiveness time, so many credit hours in the curriculum.
Continuing education credits for undoing ego, huh?
Right. So we get. I think we tend to be really harsh with ourselves, and when that happens, really the only thing that we can do is to invite again, in whatever way is meaningful for us, that presence of the part of us that is not judgmental. Mm-hmm. And so even if we're having a massive self-loathing attack, we can ask, we can remind ourselves of that gentle teacher, and sort of try to write it out with that teacher, with the thought of that teacher, however it works for you, whatever symbol you're working with of Jesus or Holy Spirit, to just sort of recognize that there's a tenderness there that I'm pushing away right now, but that doesn't mean that it's not there, and that it will. My awareness of it will return. I'm just afraid. It's really it's really just seeing that. I always go back to lesson 182. It's that we are all that frightened child that seems to be walking this world, an alien, lost and alone, and believes it ran away from its father's home and it will never be welcomed back. And that's just a devastating belief that is beyond our conscious awareness, that we're all, it's motivating us all the time, and it's a thought of desolation. And so, but I have another, I have a comforter within that wants to take that child in its arms, that is, and the course, that lesson talks about that, there is a child in you that is your innocence, and has a beautiful contrast of those two children. But it's really, we're all the one child, and what helps me begin to comfort the child within me when I start to, because I find it easier to withdraw my projections from others, but than from myself, than the ones that I project, my judgments of myself. So what helps me in that, and I think there's other people that probably do that, and so I think what's helpful is to just really try to open to that experience of that tenderness, that comforter, that older brother within that really, will join you in your fear. I mean, Jesus says, and I think it's lesson 70, I'll take, when he's talking about leading us through the clouds of guilt, if it helps for us to take his hand to do so, and that will be no idle fantasy. So, even though obviously there's no hands involved, there's no, this is just part of our mind, those images can be extremely comforting for us. And we need to, comforting ourselves is a really good idea at that point, because staying in that self-judgment is indulging the ego, and it's just gonna make our suffering prolonged. And delay does hurt more as you go along with this, because we know we have a choice. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if any of that really makes sense, but
very good sense. Yes,
it's more of the practice, again, of just, this is a practice. Once we understand the metaphysics, the rest of it is just doing it, despite our fear, despite our wanting to argue with the Course, despite and one thing, and they always remind us at the foundation that it takes a lot of humility to just really, again, just in every circumstance, I start out being wrong, and I can't muscle back to right. Mm-hmm. I don't know right. Susan doesn't know right from wrong. But I do have a right mind because we never really left the mind, and so we can join with that and open to that tenderness, that love, that innocence that we are. But we can't try to get there ourselves. It won't work. We're using faculties that were designed to go in the other direction. Yep. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that patience is so important too. And as you're saying, as you were sharing that, I was flashing on back to when I went from high school to college, and I was pretty good in high school. I got mostly straight A's, and then suddenly I was among peers that were also, pretty bright kids, and suddenly I was like struggling to get it,
right.
Passing grades in a lot of classes, and I think that's kind of true. Is when you go from the head to the heart, when you go from the theory of A Course in Miracles, having studied it now for about 3 decades or so, and off and on, and it's like, well, I think I've got a passing grade in the theory, sort of, for the most part, but now it's like, okay, now I really need to, live it, or like you mentioned, as Ken said in some of his later commentaries, we need to grow up and not in any kind of a derisive way, but just, it's in your best interest to let go of the baby stuff and really begin to practice the lab part of it, which is not judging yourself and not hanging on to the patterns that are destructive, and beginning to apply it. And it takes tremendous patience, but fortunately we've been told that infinite patience produces immediate results, so we have something to work with, right?
So, right, it's a present decision. Salvation is a present decision. So, mm-hmm. When that shift happens, I shouldn't say when we make that shift, because we don't really make that shift. Again, it's not the way we think of me making a shift, but when the result of that practice of waiting, there's a lot of waiting involved with this practice for the awareness. It seems to be a delay between choosing our right mind and then returning to peace. realizing, remembering our innocence. But but I forgot kind of where I was going with this. But I mean that's something that is really constantly a present kind of thing, and we can remind ourselves that we've been there before, and again that this is a cumulative undoing, and and really if we look at the bigger picture, which I wouldn't recommend ever analyzing this, but once in a while when you're when you're stuck and stuff, it's helpful to remind yourself, I think, that we've been here before, and we come out of it, and over time we really have become less reactive. We really have become less. We're not spending as much time there. Yes, it's still really bad. It might even be worse. I mean, it might really feel worse because we're sensitive to it. I think it does for me. Yeah. But that's why we don't stay there as long, because the incentive is, we know that there is another side to this. And again, this is, it's really helpful to think of this, and the Course uses it all the time. This is a journey, right. And it's an accelerated journey. It already calls itself an accelerated path because it's using the very obstacles to peace that we dreamed up to undo the obstacles, the belief in obstacles, and the guilt that's fueling the belief in obstacles. So, but it's still a journey, again, because it's all unconscious, and I mean the guilt itself is unconscious, and we can't move any faster than our fear will allow. And so we've hit it in all of these places in our dream. And so we've got to, as whatever's coming up for us, we're going to have to apply it. I mean, that's the practice. Mm-hmm. And if you think of it as a practice, it's a practice. It's my new purpose. It gives my life purpose that it really never had. I never had a real purpose for my life that I was conscious of. I mean, I did it for them.
I'm laughing because I can totally relate, and it's just like because really, when you think about, well, what was I doing for my life anyway, kind of thing, and
I think I was seeking but not finding.
Yeah.
And the purpose, the worldly purposes that we have, some of them go well and some of them don't, but they don't last, and so this is such a unifying principle. And practice that we can live by, and it works. So it really does help us over time become kinder and more loving. And the reason that many of us come to this course is that sense, that inner sense of being unloved and unloving, and it's undoing that. There's times when we really feel we are genuinely loving and not for gain. There's times when we can really allow ourselves to experience Jesus's love for us, and our innocence, and who wouldn't want that? You want more of it when you've had those glimpses. You just want more and more, and of course you'll experience more and more. But you have to, this is an indirect path in which we have to look at the barriers that we've made, and with a different teacher to let them go.
Yeah, and earlier, just a moment or two ago, you were mentioning how it seems sometimes more difficult as you progress, and a metaphor that I found helpful that is sort of like in the past we've taken duct tape and plastered over all the idiot lights and the warning lights on our dashboard. All the things, the low oil, the engine temperature, the collision imminent, all those kind of warnings that we didn't want to look at before. And so if we kind of like pulling off a Band-Aid, you kind of want to do it a little slowly, because if you peel off all the masking tape on the dashboard idiot lights at once, it'd be probably a little overwhelming. So if we can just kind of peel off a little at a time, but like you say, you do start to notice more and more that things that seem to be minor irritations now, because you're more aware of them, because you're paying more attention, seem to be more intense or whatever. but and also to tie into what you said, also a few moments ago, is the cumulative effect of doing that, the cumulative effect of being willing to look at the ego's just silly, not evil, like Ken says, not evil, sinful, or wicked, but just silly, strategies and its shenanigans. It is not only cumulative because it shortens the time that you typically take between noticing, because you're more sensitive and more alert, to actually saying, okay, I'm not going to do this
Right.
participate in this thought system anymore, and there's the immediate payoff as well, because in each moment that you choose to say, this is silly, I'm not doing it, I'm not going to that thought system again, then you do feel more peaceful. And I think that's what you were getting at it in your remarks a moment ago.
Right. I mean, I think there's definitely, you catch yourself sooner, hopefully. But again, remember that we are resistant, and we may really have these times where it just seems that we're having a complete meltdown again. We may have times where we're just in despair, over. I mean, again, because the ego gets very contentious and very frightened. Sensing its eventual demise, and so we're bound to have dark times with this course, and that's not a bad thing.
No.
Again, they were emphasizing that. Well, and the course itself says this, that we may actually be making tremendous progress when we're in those seemingly stuck times, and really to try to the extent possible, even when we find that we can't not judge ourselves, it's really that if it feels really harsh, we have forgotten the teacher of gentleness, and that teacher is always available. And so to whatever extent we can, that's our signal to say, at least I even though I don't feel it right now, even though I'm frightened, and because it feels like life and death when we come up against that, this unconscious collision of believing that
my identity's at stake.
We're going to be annihilated,
Yeah, exactly.
Heaven, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that may not be at all what we're thinking, but the emotional experience of that is it could be happening for us. And so, or we go through those times where we're where the ego is in full chatty meanness, and we're convinced that we're failing this course, that the course doesn't work, that we're angry with Jesus, we're angry with the course, we're angry with Ken, we're angry with Helen, however that presents, and it may present in some of those ways, and then that's really our time to just say, what, this is just my fear, and the love is still there, and to ask for an experience of how does Jesus see me right now, I mean, that's really helped me. I've been doing that for a while lately, and just to and it will come to us in some form that we understand, of just that again, that it's nothing I have done has changed his love for me, and nothing and again, that's, which also means that we see that in others. We recognize that nothing that they've done has changed my love for them, because it can, my love for them can only, if it's real, can only be the same as Jesus's love for them.
Totally inclusive is the only way it works, huh?
Yeah. So we'll have some experience of that if we can just just remind ourselves that, and even when we're not feeling it, just remind ourselves. It gives us, it brings that the comforter back in, and it can't be quite as bleak if we're thinking about Jesus. I just don't think it can. Yeah.
It seems like that's all part of the gradual, gentle process of shifting our identity from this maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem to the one where it really is the real alternative that we never left, that gentle awareness that we took with us into the dream, that we symbolize by, phrases like Holy Spirit or Jesus, and
Right.
and
Yes.
and that we can remember that childlike, lesson 182 talks about it, that it has never left that perfect innocence and is just gently, patiently, calmly waiting for us to release what hasn't been working for us. Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, we may be 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, but we're still that child, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
everybody has the same wounded inner child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's it helps to think of it that way when you're really in one of those dark places, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so how are we doing on time? Should we
Oh, I
wind
think we've went well over an hour, but it's been a great conversation. So.
talking and going off in all directions, but
Really. Well, we covered a lot of ground, and
yeah.
thank you again for sharing about the recent Temecula experience at the
Oh,
academy class.
let me just give another pitch for that.
Sure, sure.
There isn't currently. I think there's a May 2-day class on the website at Foundation for a Course in Miracles website, but under the Temecula schedule page, and they're that's as far as it goes out right now. But they just haven't gotten the schedule down yet. But there will be more classes this year, and I mean, and I can't recommend highly enough the experience of allowing yourself to go there. It is, again, we listen to Ken all the time, but there's something about really sort of that immersion of being there and taking time out of, seemingly time out of our lives. Not that our lives are not already a classroom, and they should be, but to really just, it's just sort of an intensive experience of hearing the right mind, and that is a very, very helpful thing. It helps us take it in on a much deeper level, and the teachers are on some sort of accelerated. Watching them, every time I see them again, they just seem like they are just shining with this teaching more and more, and it's just so natural, and they're funny, and they're so they're just so helpful in the way they're able to articulate this and again share from the heart of their own experience. So
I will second that. Having only been there one day, but the two sessions I attended there, I would definitely concur with that. And also, there's so much that's online, and in addition to all of the prodigious work that Ken has done in terms of books and audio and video, which are all fabulous. I'm in the Will Rogers school of Ken. I've never met one I didn't like, and Ken's work, and in addition to like the Lighthouse publications that are online. More recently, I've been going through the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, and I've been kind of skipping around for years, and finally it's like, I just need to read all these because they're all really good. So I've started a few months ago, and I'm up to like 400 and something, early 400. So I'm almost a third of the way through, and they're all brilliant. They're just brilliant.
There's sales, and if you go to the bookstore page too, there's some sales going on there.
Right.
There's a Jesus collection of all of the all except a couple of CD sets that are compiled in this whole collection with introductory material. Like Ken was intending to publish this introductory material that he had done in compiling all of this, and so that has just been published. I just started listening to it, and it's awesome. So that's a really great. They have a couple of new releases on their site, and the CD sets. I mean, I listen to him all the time still. I've always got a CD set going in my car, and one where I work out, and then when I'm cooking, and so but it can't hurt to our resistance to this is so high that we need to hear it a lot of times, put in a lot of different with a lot of different analogies and a lot of different ways. He did that brilliantly. The staff is continuing to do that brilliantly, so we are so lucky.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've chosen to be in a fortunate situation where we get to have an accelerated or seemingly accelerated undo classroom with
who knows how
impeccable teaching.
I'm very grateful.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And I'm grateful that you've been able to share this session with me,
Thank you.
and because it's always such a good reminder, and I get to remind myself of things I need to practice more, and be
We
gentle
all
enough with
need
myself with.
constant reminding. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, I'm still integrating, so we can talk about some of the other things in the future. But
Sure. Sure.
just scratching the surface, it was really, the themes were amazing. So
That's great. Well, thank you again, Susan.
thank you, Bruce.
I've been talking with Susan Dugan. My name is Bruce Rawls, and we've been talking about A Course in Miracles. And keep on forgiving. We'll
Yes.
talk to you again soon.